Welcome to Conversations with the Authors.
Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Daniel.
I'm Daryl.
And I'm Sandra.
And thank you, readers and listeners, for pressing the play button. Do you love a good fantasy novel? If Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, and The Rings of Power light up your mind, you're in for a treat. You'll hear about the nuts, bolts, and opinions, blood, sweat, and tears that go into the creation of a tale of magic, adventure, and the power of belief. Conversations with the Authors is an inside, behind-the-curtains view of Sandra and Daryl as they are interviewed by me, their son, Daniel Troop, about what it takes to conceptualize, build, and complete a fully fleshed-out dramatic fantasy filled with allegory, emotion, and love. There is a story behind every story. Mom, Dad, thank you for letting me help you with this. I appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate your doing it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I thought a conversation-style venue or media would help illustrate to our authors what our book is about.
I think that's great.
Can you tell us a little bit about how Nicholas became Santa Claus? Where did this idea come from?
It came from the Prussian stories that my parents and my grandparents and my great-grandparents and my great-great-grandparents told as I was growing up, and that I told you guys when you were growing up, and when I was listening to them and when you guys were listening to them. It was always, but wasn't he ever a kid?
And Daryl, the book is very loosely based on the Bishop of Myra. He's our Saint Nicholas. But this isn't a history book, right?
No, it isn't a history book. It's a fantasy. It's a fantasy and fiction. And I think the only reason we say it's based a little bit because we are using Saint Nicholas, who was a real person. But we've gone beyond reality in this book.
Right, absolutely.
This is something that you'd find in another world and another dimension.
Right, and more so than it not being a history lesson on St. Nicholas, which it definitely isn't, because this is a fantasy tale, but this is not your grandpa's Santa Claus. This isn't the big jolly fat man with the rosy cheeks. These aren't the little tiny elves making little choo-choo trains.
This is not the Christmas stories, and you're not going to find reindeers with red noses.
Right, it's a real
all of this.
It's a real reinvention, I think, of this.
It's a reinvention, and we try to embody Nicholas as a real person, but he lives in this fantastic world.
The Kingdom of Illumine. Right?
Kingdom of Illumine. Yes.
And so some of the places we see are again this Kingdom of Illumine, and we see this magical forest of oddities and strangeness called the Orphic Forest. Where did the idea for the Orphic Forest come from?
Well, my wife came up with that idea about the Orphic Forest. And I just kind of tapped into it, and I made some descriptions, but I took a lot of cues from her. So
a lot of that came from my grandparents' stories of the forests around where they lived when they were little, and also with my father being a scoutmaster and having American Indian counselors who were some of the scoutmasters and sub-scoutmasters.
So you really drew from a little bit of everything.
Yes.
When I heard about the Orphic Forest from her, I thought about all those stories, those old German stories about the Black Forest, and that sounded very mysterious and very cryptic. And so this story has got a lot of mystery in it, and fantasy and magic, and that name, the Orphic Forest, it's something that really drove us to imagine.
Yeah, the Orphic Forest, I really enjoy this idea. It incorporates there's this theme of inclusion, because the forest has these habitants we call the oddlings. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me about the oddlings?
The oddlings are magical creatures that come about of anything that you see in your life. A tree, a piece of grass, a piece of dust, a sunbeam, a moonbeam, rain.
It really can be anything.
But these things are imbued with a lot of not only human characteristics, but a lot of spiritual, magical characteristic.
And these are all things that Nicholas can interact with.
Yes,
these are part of his world.
Part of his world.
Now, Nicholas, we've seen media back in the day where Nicholas is a young fellow and he's helping children out and this and that. But your Nicholas, we do see him grow up, but we follow him as a young boy to a young man.
I guess, you could kind of think of it that way as kind of an epic.
Yes.
Because we're going to take him from a baby all the way to what he becomes as an adult.
This isn't really, we've seen other stories where, Nicholas, he's suddenly become Santa Claus and he can do all these amazing things. But this is really about his fantastical life living in the kingdom of Illuminae and how he comes about meeting these. There's dragons, there's murder, there's romance. Mm-hmm. This should be on HBO. This should be on Disney. This is a story I've read 3 or 4 times.
It's a coming of age story too.
Yes.
You see him come of age and become what he's going to be.
And
all of the people that aid him, and also those who try to prevent him.
It's his struggle with right and wrong, and with morality and spiritualism, and he's studying to be a priest because he has 2 uncles who were priests, mm-hmm. who are trying to control his overzealous
as I would expect you would want to do any sort of teenager or child.
Right.
You kind of want to rear them in, right? So how do you deal with magic and that kind of world that he's in, this adversity that he comes across, as you say, this evil?
Well,
he's dealing with.
He's born into a situation that he knows very little about. There are people who've plotted to make themselves great. There are people who have plotted to move all impediments from their destiny, and Nicholas is in the way for some people, and they need to take care of him. And as he grows older, he finds out about those things.
So, listeners, if you're hearing what I'm hearing, this story is not just for kids. This is for everybody. This is for teens and adults. And what motivated you to write the story in this way? Why decide to branch off, to travel the unbeaten path, as it were, into the kingdom of Illuminae and into the Orphic Forest, and with these characters and events in how Nicholas became Santa Claus?
He had to have some origin. In our story, we wanted to show where his magic came from, who he was, and how he became who he was. And he had to have a beginning. Everybody has a beginning. And so we reimagined him as this person who had to grow up in this type of world and who had to sort through the good and the evil of the world. He had to grow up and to try to form his personality. He had to find out that not all people were good, some were bad, and how to negotiate all of that. He had special gifts that he had to learn how to control. And he had to learn that he had them. And so it was quite a trial for him.
So the amazing thing, there are a lot of amazing things about this book, is that you are, I know this because I'm your son, but they may not know this, you are a married couple. And you've been married for how long now?
Oh, my goodness. We've been married for 40...
A long time.
Yeah.
So you've been married for a long time.
Right. A real long time. Was there a time when I wasn't married? I don't remember.
And not only that, but you are an interracial couple, and you're a couple dealing with having a disability and having children with disabilities. So how did being a married couple and dealing with those sorts of struggles come into play when it came about writing How Nicholas Became Santa Claus?
You know, when you're faced with adversity, whether it's physical adversity because of the children's illnesses or whether it's because of other people's ideas and things, it makes your mind very active, and you learn how to problem solve. And so some things we can solve practically, and other things we have to work out with others. In our story here, you know, there's a third way to deal with things that you can't do in the real world, and you can have magic, and that's what we have in this story.
Because I love a good magical story, and I love good characters. One of the things that stands out to me is the creativeness not only of the story, but of the characters' names. You have characters like Dobramil, and the wizard Zorna, and the evil Prince Zili, and you've got all these amazing there are reptilians, and there are all these other creatures. How did you come up with these names and these characters? How did that happen?
Some of them were based on relatives in the family that had the qualities that I wanted these particular characters to have.
Okay, so they're sort of amalgams.
They were right.
That was my word.
They were good. They were good people. They were working hard. They had specific drive. They had a specific characteristic that I wanted the characters to have.
Sometimes when you have characters, you kind of imbue them with characteristics of the people that you know.
Right.
You know, a real life is sometimes very rich in inspiration, and we
so
had quite a bit of
inspiration. I think that helps us to really connect with them too, because they feel like they could actually be somebody I could meet. So when you created these characters, Daryl, what were you looking for? What were you thinking of when you designed? Sandy wanted to impart qualities of people she knew and loved. What was it that you thought of when you created these characters?
Well, when I created the characters, I wanted to create characters that we could understand. My wife is probably the best at creating characters. And I think she's really good at it. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to be very descriptive in the way they moved through space. And
I was going to say, if there's one thing, if Sandy's good at characters, you are good at description. Your descriptions are rare, I think, in the literal world. They are as if to go to a movie theater, sit down, turn on a screen, and see these things happen. And you remember the scenes of the movies. And is that something that you thought of when you were writing these descriptions? Like what's your process?
Well, my process is just like when I go to see a Lucas movie or a Spielberg movie or any of those wonderful guys, or a Disney movie, I'm looking at the screen, I'm following a story. In my head, when I write, I am seeing the movie on the screen. I'm seeing my story played out before me in my mind. And somebody said once, it was like the color commentary that you get when you hear a baseball game on the radio, when you hear a boxing on the radio. If anyone has ever had that experience, because I used to listen to boxing, for instance, or a baseball game with my father when I was a kid on the radio, and you heard the color commentary where the guys are telling you how he reached up and he got this and he turned around and he frowned and he looked and he ran downfield or something. I wanted to make that picture come alive in your mind.
And then I'm going to top it off by pestering him and saying, what did it smell like? What did it taste like? What did it look like?
My wife is one for the five senses, and so am I, but she really wants to get you to not only see it and hear it, but to smell it,
As a chef, I can say that I'm definitely one for the taste and the smell of things. So to be able to get the taste and the smell of the book and some things in there are amazing.
You know, and the human brain is very sensitive to smell. And so that's the only thing that goes into our brains, into our neocortex, that's not filtered. It goes straight to the brain. Everything else goes through the thalamus. And so but that's why when we smell a fruitcake, we might think about Christmas, or we smell evergreen, we'll think of Christmas, and we'll have that feeling all over us. So I try to satisfy that need, and so when my character goes and digs something up, I'll describe the smell of the earth.
And sometimes you don't even have to smell it. You just feel it. It makes your eyes tear, or it makes you nostalgic, or makes you very sad, and you have no idea why you're feeling like that.
So we're going to try to employ all the five senses, because we want to put you in there. We want to lose you in that story.
So, talking about being lost in the story, is there something you want our listeners, our readers, to take from the story? Is this a morals kind of story?
Well, there's a morals kind of story, but we're not hitting you over the head with that. That's something, those are certain conclusions that you'll draw yourself. We want you to be entertained. We want you to enjoy that. We want you to see the same movie that we're seeing.
A vacation from reality.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm all about that. Nowadays, we definitely need that.
Everybody needs that.
One of my favorite things when I was a kid was getting a book that I couldn't put down, especially if it was a break in between school. I wanted to be able to pick that book up on Friday and not put it down until I finished it on Tuesday.
Right. And speaking of being a good book, you've already come across a few super fans.
Oh, I've got some super fans, and one person I know has read the book twice and has said she's going to read it a third time. This time she's going over the highlighter because she just wants to remember all of the characters. When she sees me, she asks me about, what about the Orphic Forest? What about the Oddlings? I wish you had some pictures in there, but if you read the book, guys, the pictures are going to come because they're going to be placed right there in your mind. My wife came up with good characters. I've got description.
I can certainly certify that the descriptions will draw a story in your head. This is not going to be a problem for you. There's no problem with visualizing in the story. And I've read this book a few times myself, and it's definitely one that you can't put down. It is velcroed to my hand, stuck with super glue, wrapped in duct tape. It's there. I'm not ready to put it down yet. And before we close out, we talked about these characters before. What is your favorite character so far? Without spoiling, who is your favorite character so far?
Well, we've got a wizard who's got a long beard, and he's got the robes, and he's got the staff. It's one of my favorites. Very magical. I can tell you a little bit about him, but I can tell you a lot about him when you read the book.
And this book is going places. It feels like there's a bigger story coming, maybe?
Yeah. We've got ideas. I'm working on something else, but my wife is also working on something. So we may have two other things out that are going to come out eventually. But we're concentrating on the first, right now. And hey, give me a call, George Lucas.
Well, this series
Disney.
This series is going to be about 26 episodes, so I hope that we'll get more listeners.
Oh, we are.
I hope that Lucas is listening. I hope that Disney is listening. I hope Netflix, HBO are listening, because this is something that they're not going to want to miss out on. And if you, readers and listeners, are interested in picking up the book, you can check out troopbooks.com, where you can pick up your copies there. It'll take you directly to the publisher page at Ewing's Publishing, and you can pick up a hardcover or a softcover. I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening.